one reason we want to do this too is because a lot of times you don't see this side of us. Many of you don't get to know Morgan real well or see her throughout the church. She's kind of busy doing different things. So I think it's a good opportunity for the church to hear our hearts, kind of our focus, what we're about, and therefore get to know the church a little bit better. So the topics were pain, parenting, and pastoring. And we had to kind of narrow down some of the questions because there were a lot. But I'm just going to start right off with the pain one. How's that sound? Get that out of the way first. And somebody wrote in, how does Morgan handle the constant criticism of Shane? So yes, tell us how. You have to keep the microphone up a little. Yeah, there you go.
Depends on who, what, where, why, and how. Sometimes I handle it better than others. Sometimes I'm like, you're lucky you're behind a computer screen. Mama Bear comes out a little bit. I would say mostly I handle it just by trying to brush it off for the most part. If there's criticism, if there's constructive feedback, that's a whole different thing. We're completely open for that. He deals with that. I deal with that
often,
all the time. And that is absolutely fine. Have no issues with that. It's more when people are just mean-spirited or hateful.
And I kind of shield you from a lot.
Yeah, I don't
you
see a
probably
lot of
see
it either.
95% of it for that reason.
Yeah. Also, it depends if it's coming from the world, it's a little easier for me to kind of brush off. If it's coming from a brother or sister in Christ, that's when it's a little more difficult to handle for me. He's a lot stronger in that area. I have a harder time with it. I think the reason it's hard for me probably is because I see what goes on behind the scenes. I see him up at 3 a.m. I see him praying for you guys, fasting for you guys. And also, just to throw it out there, there's not a whole lot of criticism that we hear from in our own church body here. So that's at least good. That would be a lot harder.
Yeah.
But just broadly.
I'd have to retire if that was the case.
But, I see him pouring his heart out in sermons, sometimes leaving our family to be with your family, just different things and everything that goes into it and giving all that he has. Not that he's perfect by any means, I'm just saying I do see the heart behind it. And so then to hear the criticism is just, that can be a little difficult.
Yeah, that's a good, and that's a good point you made because there is a big difference between the world criticism and when I step on toes, I expect criticism. I mean, that just comes with it. And that was the next question. How do you, Shane, handle criticism? A couple different ways. Number one is I usually don't look at most of it. People think I'm reading all the Facebook posts. I rarely do. I can't read the comments or unless somebody notifies me of one. Like we had a lot of people dropping some F-bombs on one of my posts. So I deleted that whole, I think it got hooked onto an atheist website and then I don't know what happened, but it was not good. And so people made me aware of that, and then I just deleted the whole thing. But usually I don't really know about it. And then some people, the world's going to be upset. And then there's Christians. They call themselves Christians, and I call them, modern-day Pharisees or heresy hunters. They're just very rigid and hard. So, I kind of roll with the punches on that one. But if there's godly criticism and coming from people that, hey, have you thought about this? Or constructive criticism, that's why they call it that, because it's constructive. Then I usually look at it and pray about it. I usually look at most feedback. I never just assume, I'm right and you're wrong. That's not a good approach. You usually take that back to the Lord and find out, their heart, my heart, Lord, what are you trying to teach me here? So that's how I handle it. Number one, I don't look at a lot of it. Especially if it's from outside. People, and they still do it. They send Pastor Shane with no return address. It's probably not going to get opened because those are never good. And especially letters, and there's nothing at the bottom. And if a person has a valid complaint, put your name, put your number. We'd love to talk with you. There's nothing wrong in that. So I actually, like she said, God's kind of gifted me in this area to, it doesn't really hurt. It doesn't, like thick skin. It just kind of comes with the territory. You have to expect that in this culture. And then how do you deal with hurt you cause each other? I'll let you tackle that one. But the answer is pretty easy, actually.
What is it?
We have to practice what we preach.
Yeah.
When we hurt each other, we, obviously apologize, acknowledge it, and take it to the Lord, and not try to, be prideful and arrogant and think we're right. That's the way it is. We try to mend that. Okay, we hurt. Like yesterday, in communication, yesterday just happened. I don't think I hurt you, but I hurt my daughter, because my little daughter, 7 years old, wanted me to take her to the store and get gift cards. And my wife said she just wants something to put in her new little wallet. So I get her fake gift cards, because,
With no value on them.
with no value.
Just the actual card.
Yeah, so she came home crying. Dad didn't really get me gift cards. I'm like, you told me she just wants something to put in her wallet. I'm not going to spend $150 on gift cards. So, those kind of communication things, a lot of times, because I'm more private and I don't tell her a lot of maybe the burden I'm carrying, because we've learned that if I share a little bit of the burden, it becomes a mountain on her. So I just kind of hold some of that to myself on leading the church. And if I hurt her or vice versa, we acknowledge it. We repent. We know that's one way the enemy will get into your marriage, through hurt and through bitterness and resentment. And, that enemy just keeps planting those seeds. So we try to deal with it early, and she'll say, that's just my opinion. You shouldn't have did that, or you hurt me. And I'm like, okay. Well, here's how I saw it. And, we kind of work through it. Communication's good. And sometimes it's good just to go put on worship and let God fix it. Because ever get to where talking's not really helping? Just don't want to talk about it right now. Just move forward. But I think that at least that's from my perspective. And then, of course, taking it back to God and knowing our kids are watching us and the church is watching us.
That's actually almost exactly what I wrote. And we've been married 17 and a half years, so that's a lot of years to be hurting each other, We mess it up and fix it and get it right sometimes, then mess it up all over again and fix it again and get it right. And you guys know from your own experience, too. That's just kind of the wave of marriage, and it comes with hurt, and you have to be able to move on from that. So I put try to forgive quickly. It's not always easy. We're not, saying, oh, just do this, and it's so easy. It's definitely hard, especially depending on the hurt. Some are more than others. Some things are just, oh, I was a little offended by that. Whatever, I can move on. Other things are a little more, cut a little more deeply.
Is there any examples that we could give them of hurt? Because I was trying to think of that wouldn't be too transparent, I guess. But
I wish I thought of that ahead of time. I'm not good on the spot. I have to prepare. You can probably think of one while I keep going. But with that, even though it's not easy, God's word tells us to forgive. And so that has to be our model. That has to be our basis for how to deal with things. And just remembering each other aren't perfect. Sometimes I think we get it in our head that whoever we're married to is Mr. or Mrs. Perfect, and that's just not true. They're not going to be. They can't meet all our needs. They can't fulfill all our expectations, all of that. So if we can kind of remember that they're just, a sinner as well, trying to do their best to get through life. I do think a lot of times the hurt that when we get hurt, it's unintentional. Sometimes it definitely can be intentional, but I think 80% of the time, it's an unintentional thing. And so if we can kind of keep that in mind of just showing grace and knowing that maybe it wasn't on purpose, and kind of go from that point of view. And then I also put communication versus staying bitter. There's been times that I've not been great at that. I've just let something fester and fester, and I've got bitter and resentful, and it's gone on for a while, and that's just ugly.
Can you relate?
It just doesn't feel good for anybody in the house. So just the quicker you can communicate and be able to move forward, the better.
And I think hurt, I can't think of big issues, but, like I've shared this with the congregation too, and she told me, I don't know when it was, I took it well, when, I've been putting down other pastors too much. Like you said, I don't remember what you said, but you're sure saying that every sermon. I'm like, it kind of hurts, but it was a good hurt. And then also sometimes with churches, like the decisions we'll make, and if I forget to involve her in some things, because we're just going.
We're doing this.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you about the new children's ministry building. So I think it's just communication and nothing intentionally hurt. I can't think of anything.
On the pastor thing, it was just, sometimes I forget that I'm here every single week both services, and not everybody is. So when it just felt like for a few weeks or months, it felt like in my mind in every sermon, he would say something like, not all these big church, not everyone's hitting on sin and repentance, which I don't disagree with. I think it's fine for him to say that. It just felt like it became all the time that it was like, well, these churches aren't, and we are, and so I just kind of said gently as I could, like, you don't have to say that they're not, just do it. We will do it. We don't have to always say that they're not doing it. Yeah. But I forget that not everyone hears that as often as I do.
But, it was good. You take it back. Yesterday we got, she said something and said, you shouldn't have handled it that way. And I got upset. And, we still kind of disagree on it, but, oh, well, we'll just move forward. That would take a half hour to explain. So I think that's the segment on pain. How do you deal with pain? Maybe this will probably come up with pastoring as well. How do you avoid burnout in ministry? It seems like so many pastors quit or have nervous breakdowns. And I don't know if you know the numbers, but it's pretty alarming. I mean, 1 out of 10 actually finish in the ministry that start at like 25. Churches are closing down. I think it's 1,500 pastors are quitting a month, resigning. I didn't believe this until I Googled it, and it's like up there with one of the top 5 most stressful jobs with the President of the United States. I'm like, I don't think so. Not with Iran and things going on. But it's up there with stressful because it's 24/7. It's carrying burden. It's walking on eggshells. It's making sure you don't offend here. You make sure here. You build up here. You encourage. You strengthen. You don't let down. And it's just a constant, a pouring out. So how do you avoid burnout in the ministry? A couple things. We've set up some pretty good boundaries in the past with taking a day off, and that has not been happening much lately. That day off is kind of vanished. So I will take sometimes a week off here, or seasonal in the past. But something we're praying about, I'll share in the future, is the possibility of a sabbatical, where you take a little bit of extended time and you just grow spiritually, you disconnect, and you kind of re-energize yourself. Because I think most people, most jobs, you have about 100 to 150 days off a year. If you factor in weekends, some people who work 3 days get Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. Or holidays, vacations. So this kind of what I do, you don't get a lot of time like I used to get when I had weekends off or work 410s. Amen. Anybody like that schedule? Those are great. So I'm not complaining, but you have to, when you drain your adrenal glands, when you are fatigued, when you are not burnt out, you're just tired. There has to be a way to re-energize yourself. So that's how I avoid burnout. Is normally I'll avoid it before it even happens. So if I'm starting to get burned out, and I don't even know if burned out is the right word. I don't know. Do you want to chime in? Oh, that's your phone. That is your phone during service. That's okay.
I silenced
nobody knew until you said anything.
Yeah.
I'm not on the verge of burnout. Probably Morgan is more than me with the baby and up a lot. And so we take that time off. We make sure we have boundaries and say no a lot, but I think there will come a time, where I'll take an extended sabbatical just to rest and recuperate, and we'll explain that later. The elders have already talked to me about that, and it's kind of a little of an announcement now. I don't know what that looks like, because also I've been asked to speak at a large men's conference in Michigan, and then possibly fly to do something in Texas. And then Jim Garlow, who's coming, wants me to take a tour of the United Nations in Washington, D.C., and show how they do Bible studies in the United Nations, and a tour of the Capitol with a congressman. And so I don't know what God's doing in all that. I don't know what this I don't know what it is. It's a unique calling at this church. So I'm trying to protect all that, safeguard all that. And but that's how I kind of know myself, and I don't get too burned out or carried away with things.
You're right. The only thing I would add to that is I think you're good at being filled up too. So you can't really pour out from if you're empty yourself. So I think he's pretty good at making sure he's staying filled up by different sermons, pastors, connecting with people who influence him spiritually, worship, his own personal prayer time. I think that's a safeguard for sure.
Yeah, that and burnout, and my focus on health. I think that plays a big role because when your body's running how it should be running, you don't get as tired, you don't get as fatigued. You can go longer, harder, faster, stronger in the ministry, and because you're taking care of your body. It's a lot of the people who kind of just neglect that because they think it's not spiritual, and then they start to have a lot more. And you'll see that. Wayne Cardero wrote a book, Leading on Empty. Mark Driscoll talked about his nervous breakdown. And a lot of these guys are on high-octane caffeine. They're running 15 hours a day. They're not taking care of their body, and they're just falling apart. So if health becomes an issue, health becomes a priority, that kind of helps too, for sure, when in ministry. And then this one, I don't want to spend too much time. Walk us through the sermon preparation process. Usually I have to prepare my heart before I prepare the message. What flows out usually is my lifestyle, my life being filled up with God, being filled with the Holy Spirit. That comes out in the sermon. So before I look at sermonizing and preparing on paper, I have to make sure I'm being filled and fed. And a lot of times what I deliver or what comes out that's not in the notes is what God's been doing in my heart. And but the sermon prep, like she mentioned, I just get up sometimes at 3:30, 4:30, just get up. And then I spend a lot of time in worship with my prayer list, and then go into reading the Word of God just for myself. And then I go into preparing the sermon for Wednesday or Sunday. When there's Wednesday and Sunday, that's a tricky week because you can't just put something together. It takes hours and studying. One word can take you an hour just looking at the nuances in the Greek and the Hebrew. So it's, and then I'll go probably take a walk, exercise a little bit, and then I'm ready for the day. So that's my consistent pattern. I'm just not a night person. I bless all of you who are, but my mind just shuts off right about now. And it's hard to even read the Bible. It's hard to read the Bible. Ask her. I've tried after 7 o'clock, it's just, my mind just shuts down. But 4 a.m, I can really read. I don't know. Do you want to comment on that one? That one's probably pretty easy.
I think you covered it. I would just say everything you said.
And then what part of pastoring, and again, if you have questions, we'll hold them right to the end if we have some time. What part of pastoring is the most difficult? What is the most fulfilling? And I think I've mentioned this a few times. The most difficult is seeing people, with living water just steps away, and they don't want to come and drink. You know the answer. We as Christians, we can give people the answer. And how frustrated do you get when they don't see the answer and they fall deeper and deeper and deeper into sin? So I think that's the most difficult part, is seeing the lives destroyed that could be built back up again. And then the most fulfilling is actually the opposite of that, seeing people filled with the Spirit. Seeing people restore their marriage, seeing people come to morning worship or wanting to fast or wanting to pray, and just that spiritual hunger for God, it's very fulfilling in the ministry.
Hardest part, I don't know. I have a couple, I guess. I think the first one that comes to mind is the fishbowl, living in the fishbowl, and everyone's watching and looking. And I don't say that to mean that I think I'm always on your guys' mind or anything like that. I think that.
Yeah,
I think
it's
just part of the nature. It's just, you live in a fishbowl. People watch what you do, what you say, what you wear, what you eat, how you treat your kids, how you treat your husband, just all of it. And so, on one hand, I feel like that should be. That's every Christian, because if you go to work, if you go, you're on sports or whatever, if anyone knows that you're a Christian, they're watching you. So that kind of is common to everybody, but it is definitely a little bit more, I think, in this position.
If I go in the grocery store, I run into somebody, they start looking at what are you getting in your grocery? I'm like, well, you got a 6-pack of beer. What are you looking at my thing? And what do you look at my shopping cart for? I'm joking, of course, but it is a fishbowl,
So that can be hard. And it's hard because I think you guys know from listening to him, and if you just know me, I think we're both pretty transparent. So it's such a fine line because you want to be real and you want to be relatable. But then if you're too real and too relatable, then you get judged. And so it's just this but I can't really fake anything. So it's kind of like you either, take it or leave it. but that's difficult. And then the other thing I think that's hard for me, I don't think as much for him, is it's kind of lonely. Not as in he's gone a lot, but more as in real, deep friendships. It's hard to kind of cultivate those when your husband is the pastor. So when other people are opening up at Bible study, I can't open up quite as much. Or when you're trying to build a friendship, it's always in the back of your mind, well, okay, what are they going to think? Or, can't say too much because while everyone else is venting about this or that, my husband is their pastor. And so, it's just it can be lonely at times. There's been seasons, I think, where I've kind of told him I'm just so frustrated over that issue. And then other times it's not as much of a big deal. So I think it comes and goes depending on where I'm at in life and, if I'm having a hard time in life in general.
Yeah, I mean, this church is a true blessing, but I know at most churches, the number one, the people who receive the most amount of gossip are the pastor and his wife, usually. Because most people, they're gossiping, not doing things right. Not here, of course, but most places and over the years, we've heard about it quite a bit. We've had to confront some of it. And we've had people that we knew and trust and love and then end up, really turning on you. And you've all had that. So I think it just kind of makes you kind of polarized and wanting to choose friendships carefully and different things.
Yeah. We had a pretty big one a while back that was probably the hardest thing we've ever dealt with in ministry. And it did make me kind of clam up a little bit. And it was hard to break out of that shell again and be willing to let people back in, just because it hurts, it can be hurtful. But the most fulfilling, watching people, breakthroughs, salvation, people stepping into their gifting is exciting for me too. It's kind of like you feel like a proud parent when someone's, starting a ministry, or you just see them doing good and ministering to people, or watching the kids and the kids getting excited. And so it's definitely more fulfilling. There's more good than there is hard, for sure.
Yeah, that's true. And what's your biggest regret? This one's easy. That I didn't start following the Lord when I was a teenager. That's a no-brainer. But God used it. I don't try to harp on that, but that's probably one of my biggest regrets. I think if my biggest regret in ministry would be probably to have been a lot more humble when I first started the church and listened and been more gracious. And I think that was one of John MacArthur's big regrets too, because, you're just a person, you're getting a ministry, you start to, I used to run a business, and you can't. Ministry is not like running a business. You volunteers, not people on payroll. And so just being more gentle and loving and knowing that people aren't always where you're at spiritually is really helpful. So I wish I could repair some of the, and it wasn't bad, but just more, when you're affirm for the truth, sometimes you take a hard stance on things. And people have said, Shane, your preaching has really changed over the years. You've really softened up, even though the message hasn't softened, the heart has softened up, more humility. And that really just because of a lot of brokenness over the years and being humbled by God and different things. And I'm hoping I'm going to try to find the very first sermon I ever preached when we started this church and share it with you once we get closer to our anniversary. We are celebrating 10 years this September on the church. So
I remember when we first started the church thinking, I can't wait for 10 years from now when things are like established and, going good. And I'm like, you snap, and here we are.
Yeah, because it wasn't established
I cannot
then.
believe it's almost been 10 years. Cannot believe it.
We just grabbed this person for childcare. We just had this family pass out bulletins for ushering and just didn't have a building. What was your biggest regret? Did you answer that?
I didn't, but it's similar with yours.
Oh, like the past, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a similar past.
So many regrets. How do you pick?
No. So many regrets. How do you pick?
Are we talking parenting, pastoring, marriage,
your
own self?
What's your biggest regret in marriage?
Moving on. That was the last Q&A.
Well, I think, do we answer that one?
Kidding.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think both of us would have been a lot less selfish when we first got married. More not as so selfish and self-focused. What is your greatest fear? Do you want to go first?
Sure. I have two. You can see I'm indecisive. What was the other question? I had two on the other one, too. I can't pick one. My greatest fear would be kids walking away.
She took my answer.
Because of the ministry. We try really hard to just let them have a normal life. They're normal kids like everyone else's kids. They have the freedom to mess up and get back on track just like everyone else. So we try our best with that. But we are here a lot, and we don't apologize, for that with the kids. But I think it's my biggest fear, because you always hear about PKs and how crazy they get, and wandering from the faith and all that kind of stuff. So I think that would be one of my greatest fears. And then the second would be not finishing strong, just because I know anything can happen to anyone. And you say, not us. We're gonna finish strong. But pride comes before a fall. So always wanting to make sure that we're just running that race and keeping our eyes focused on Jesus and doing the best that we can, so that, even like you've said in your sermon, you might see me limping to the finish line, but I'm going to make it to the finish line. Yeah. So
that's good. And about the kids, I feel the way too. But a lot of times PK kids rebel because either, number one, they've been in too hard of an environment, where they've been controlling, and you're the pastor, you can't do this, and enforcing rules without a relationship. So we do probably allow them to do more than maybe certain other people would. Not a lot of freedom. They don't have a phone and things like that. But I mean, just be kids. We're not going to come home and preach the word at you all the time and tear you down. And so let them experience a little bit of life within the boundaries of what's responsible. So that way they won't feel like they've been stifled. Of course, we'll still choose movies for them and things like that, but just we don't want to have that heavy-handed, because that's what they rebel from usually. They rebel from that, I'm out of the house, freedom, and then they do their thing, or they don't like the Christ they see in their parents, and they rebel from that. So I want to be real transparent, ask for forgiveness, watch daddy struggle. Here's why we struggle. I don't claim to be perfect. And they watch you go through that faith, and you actually lead them in that area of falling forward. And so not acting perfect, because they can spot hypocrisy. I think kids can spot it way more. But Dad, you said this Sunday. Oh, well, I know, but, and they're good at that. And also one of my greatest fears, I'll just tell you, is when we're gone, that this church doesn't turn away from God's word, doesn't become liberal, doesn't get the wrong pastor in here that will take it in an unhealthy direction. We've all together have been building. And I know God will sustain it. God will raise up people. So I'm not worried in that sense. And we take fear captive and we don't dwell on it. So on one hand, I'm not worried at all, because God built the church. He's going to see it through. But on the other hand, that's the personal fear I struggle with. And I also am concerned for our children and grandchildren, for some of you, on what is happening in our nation. Because I do know people. If you saw that new picture that came out, was the President of the United States recently. I know 4 of those people on his board. I talk to them regularly. And we are in a very interesting spot in our nation. For example, we have the left and the media and liberals calling our president a terrorist for what he did to Iran's terrorists. And it's just maddening. It is what's going to happen as we keep going this course. I'm praying for revival. I'm praying for restoration. But I am concerned with this uprise of millennials who don't value God. They're walking away from faith. They don't claim any religion. That's something that does concern me. There's a fear there, not for myself necessarily, but for family and for our families, and what we're leaving them, and what we're not fighting for, and what we should be fighting for, with godly admiration, godly desire, not just to, for example, get political or do these things, but Lord, what do you want us to do? How can we make a difference in our society? I mean, is anyone else feeling that out there with looking at the news? And we're not supposed to fear though, because we're called to make a difference. But I think that would be one of my greatest fears for the church, what I mentioned, and then also for our nation and where we're going with everything, because what we're seeing in Hollywood, I mean, you saw that one actress said, her abortion got her where she is today to win that Grammy, and I just want to throw up. And this stuff is acceptable in transgenderism and allowing kids to dress. It's just incredible how far we've drifted. So those are my thoughts on those. We had a few on parenting and marriage. Parenting and marriage, or actually parenting, but let me say this. We have not mastered this area. We can plug you in with some good families that maybe have finished well, and their kids have turned out well, and so we don't want to act like we have all the answers here, but we do maybe can give some insight. How do you deal with the constant chaos in the home?
Where was that question?
That's a new one that came in.
Because it is constant chaos.
Controlled chaos. So how do you deal with the chaos in the home?
Not very well.
Not very well.
No, just, trying again to, and it's been difficult, I'll be honest with me, in this season with the baby. Typically for me, if I can be in the Word, I have worship playing, I've had my prayer time, that things go much smoother. Even if it's still chaotic, at least I am not feeling chaotic. But in this season with the baby, and not using that as an excuse, but it's just the fact, I haven't been in the Word as much as I should or could be. And so then I feel a little more out of control. So my biggest tip would be make sure you as the parent are getting your time with the Lord and really being able to have that be the start. It seems to just set the tone a little more for the day. And then just trying to teach them, we have 5, and that gets
almost 2 teenagers.
Loud and crazy and obnoxious and annoying at times, and all the things that your kids do. And so just trying to wrangle them in and, kind of get down on their level. Sometimes if if the smaller one is acting up, I have to bend down and really kind of look her, eye to eye. Or if the taller one, I have to stand up on a chair. I told you. Our oldest is taller than me. But, just trying to communicate with them what's okay, what's not okay, what's allowed, what's not allowed. And doing that doesn't mean that they're going to just, snap and be perfect, but it's just the constant being consistent and keep doing it. And eventually I hear that it will someday pay off.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say too. I heard the baby last night too, 11:30 and 1:30. And so we have the baby, newborn, getting up, and then we have the girls and my son. And I was gone for a few days. I went to a cabin, many of you know, and fasted and made a prayer list. And it was a good time to get away, but didn't feel real great because of the fast. But that kind of is to be expected. But I come home and my garage is turned into a workshop by my son who wants to be a carpenter. So he's got sawdust everywhere.
In your teacup, I think. In your teacup.
In my teacup. Yeah, the sawdust everywhere. And he just how did this happen? But what I was trying to remember is, thank God he's doing this. Thank God we want to nurture them in their giftings. So I look at chaos kind of in the home as the kids growing and learning. It doesn't mean we allow bad behavior. We address it, but to let kids be kids, let them have fun in a fun environment, but also learn in that environment. And we try to bring some order into that chaos. Whether we pray together as a family, we try to do that in the mornings. And try to do a daily devotional with them once in a while at the dinner table. That's kind of fallen off to the side. But like she said, you start that day off with your relationship with God, because from that is when everything else is going to flow from how you're doing inside spiritually. If you're strong spiritually, you can take on a lot more, can't you? Yeah. But when you're not doing good spiritually, that's where it's all falls apart. And we just expect it. With 4 girls in the house and a boy, 5 count Morgan girls, it's there's going to be some amount of activity.
I think
for sure.
I think too it helps. I just told our oldest daughter this a couple weeks ago. The reason it is good to have at least one good girlfriend is so that you hear that things are not uncommon or not just common to you. So when, sometimes I remember years ago when I thought bedtime was just I still don't like bedtime. I like it because they're all going to bed, but I don't like the process of bedtime. And especially when they were little. I need a drink. I need to go to the bathroom. I need, every excuse in the book to get up. And I was just losing my mind. And I thought it was only us. I just pictured all my other friends' homes, good night, Johnny, good night, Sarah. And they go to bed and mom does whatever she wants. And I honestly thought that's how it went in everyone else's home until I started talking to people and finding out they also despise the bedtime process. And so I was like, yes, it's not just us. So I think it does help to kind of hear that we're all in this together. And that's what I tell, sometimes I'll get a text from someone about, their kid doing something crazy or this or that. And my reply is, we're all in this together. It's not just you. That particular situation might be just you, but we're all trying to figure this parenting thing out and doing the best we can and doing it according to God's word. And it's just going to look different for everyone because everyone's different. Everyone's kids are different. But I think it does help for sure to know that you're not the only one and that other homes are a bit chaotic as well.
Yeah, they are. And chaos means, there's not a lot of yelling in the house because we don't really allow that too much. Kids will get upset, but when we talk to them one-on-one, I'll just follow my son into his room. He'll slam the door shut and I'll say, no, you're not slamming. And we go and I talk to him about their attitude. And if you lower your voice and kind of talk to them peacefully and answer or maybe wait till the right time. You don't want to just throw gasoline on the fire. Sometimes it's about timing and just remember they're kids growing up in a very difficult world nowadays, especially with electronics. How do you monitor electronics? Tito, did you figure it out? We talked about that. Yeah, it's hard. So monitoring electronics. But what if you have different disciplining methods, or if one parent doesn't want to discipline? That question came in too.
All I put for that was hard. So I was going to let you answer that because that's hard. It's really hard.
What if you have different discipline methods, or if one parent doesn't want to discipline? Well, usually, this is part of when we do pre-marriage counseling. We haven't in a little while, but this is one of the things you get out up front. You try to learn more about the other person, parenting, how they were raised, what to expect. But it depends on the disciplining methods. As long as a child is being disciplined, meaning they're learning that their behavior is not good, and hopefully parents can agree on at least that something has to be done. And you try to find that middle ground. Okay, well, no electronics, or the guy gave us a little bit of tissue on our gluteus maximus for a reason, and that's what it's called, right? You're behind. But you have to agree that the child does need discipline. You can't just look at this is what's happening in the world today is we're just letting, in America, a lot of the families are letting kids do whatever they want. And they're, especially when you see them screaming in the store and I want that ice cream. Okay, Johnny, here you go, be quiet. If that ever happens, we take them out and say, you're not getting anything now. So we kind of agree on.
But that was a learning process.
Yeah, that was a process.
Cave,
oh yeah,
and
that's
true. I still do sometimes. You
cave more than me.
Yeah. For sure.
They always go, Mom will let us stop by and get ice cream. I just tell them, no, we're not getting ice cream.
But then I'm like, if I turn the computer off for 3 days, it's not coming on. And I'll come home and someone's like, but Dad said it was okay. Yeah. So I think we're strong in different areas with our
I've had enough.
methods.
Turn on watch YouTube for a minute. And we try to watch make sure that the programs are good and different things, but it is hard. You need to give yourself a little bit of grace. So if you want to discipline and the other spouse doesn't, you'd have to have a heart-to-heart and explain and show them why a lack of discipline is really going to hurt the kids in the long run. This is when kids need to be shaped and they need to learn that things can hurt them. And by discipline, you can really help point them in the right direction.
And if you just go, off of God's word, he disciplines those who he loves. So if God disciplines us, then certainly we have an obligation to discipline the kids. However that looks in your home could vary a lot. But the question was, what if you have different disciplining methods, or if one parent doesn't want to discipline? So for that parent, I would say that's not really an option. You have to discipline your kids, especially if you're trying to live by God's word, which is what we should be doing. How and all of that's going to have to be worked out.
Yeah. How do you find the balance between enabling your kids and not enabling them? Ooh. Well, most of you probably know, but enabling means allowing them to continue in a destructive pattern. I don't know if this came in from somebody who maybe has older kids at home that, by allowing them to stay in their home, they're still going out and drinking and maybe drug use, and they're enabling them by providing a house. I've had to answer this question a lot over the years, and I usually tell the parents, you need to take it to God and do what is best for you. I think there's a time and a place where you tell them, I can't keep enabling your lifestyle. But there's other times where you want to offer, okay, son, you always have a place to lay your head. I'm going to help you get through this. I love you enough. And it's hard to find that balance because there's a line there. I don't think there's a one size fits all approach. I think if your kid's about ready to change, you don't want them out in the street. They're, hey, why don't you stay here another week? And somebody might say, no, you're enabling them. But then there's another time where they're just taking advantage of you. The roof under your head, the roof you're providing, the food, they're just taking advantage. They're still going out and causing problems and drinking or back into drugs and their lifestyle. And no problem, just come back home, no problem. And you're kind of enabling that. You might have to drop the hammer and say, no more of this. We can't. I love you enough to not allow you to keep doing this. So that, to me, depends on the situation. And it's hard to say, oh no, this is how you always do. But if you're talking about younger kids, enabling them, I don't know what the question would be about exactly. Maybe what you allow, what they don't allow. For example, because it might be the same person. At what age should they have a phone?
I have a whole answer for that one.
Oh yeah. Well, it's kind of and if you have questions, you can ask on the microphone just a minute. But I think finding the balance between enabling is you talk, you communicate, and here's what's happening, here's what's going on in our home with our kids, and what's the best plan for this. But let's tackle that one. This might be what the person was talking about. And what age should they have a phone? 10 years old? 9?
Okay. The reason
Never, huh, Tito?
The reason this is hard is because I know there are parents out there with kids younger than ours that have phones. So if that is the case and that's you, we're not judging at all. I'm just going to give you what we have done and what we have seen, and that's the best I can offer. So just so you know that. Our oldest is 14, and they go down from there, and none of them have a phone. One of them does have an iPod, and that child has proven that she is responsible enough to have an iPod. However, even within that, there are a lot of restrictions. In fact, she was asking for a certain app that we didn't allow her to have for a long time until Christmas, and she told one of her friends that she was asking for that particular app for Christmas, and she laughed. And I started laughing because it was just funny to me. Or like our son, different kids will be like, oh, I'm getting made fun of for this, or I'm getting made fun of that. I'm like, it's okay, because as you grow, you're going to get made fun of for your faith. You're going to get made fun of because you're not doing certain things, because you're not watching certain things, because you're not, whatever it is, you're going to be made fun of all the time. So to me, that's not really a bargaining chip, because I'm like, welcome to the club. I get made fun of too. So anyway, even her iPod is restricted. We do have, our 10-year-old is at the gym over 10 hours a week training for gymnastics. So it has at least crossed my mind, should we give her a phone? Should we not? And the answer is no for now. There's different things, maybe a watch or a flip phone where she could just call or just text, things like that. But I think one of the reasons for us is, there's so many reasons. One, I don't think they have the maturity yet, not just our kids, I think just kids in general, and I don't mean that rudely. It's just a fact. They only get mature with time, and there's so much out there bombarding them and coming against them that even if they themselves are a good kid, the enemy is very crafty. For us, we've seen a girl through a phone be lured and go missing for 3 days, and we helped put up posters and signs all around town a few years back. We've walked through with families whose boys discovered pornography because they had the phones early on. We've seen gosh, we've seen all kinds of things. And so for us, it's just not worth the risk yet.
Yeah, and if you're asking what age, like what Morgan said, it's up to each family. But I think if the child is not very responsible, number one, but also number two, if you just give them a phone and it's just unlimited internet access, I think we have to really look at that, because that's it takes a lot of wisdom at an age of a child to have that much information at the palm of their hand. They can just put in any picture, they can put in anything. So if you want an age, what I would think, I'm guessing probably 16, when they have a vehicle, if they're driving then, and they're going to be out and they've shown responsibility, or maybe, if you're 14, 15 in a flip phone. I mean, it depends what your situation is. And like she mentioned, there is a watch that the kids can get. Only you can call it, and you can only give access to the numbers they can call. So it's a great way for communication. They can't go online and things like that. But I also think you should put filters on the phones for your kids. You can put on a Covenant Eyes that will block pornography sites, and you can actually get a report of what they're searching. So there's added accountability. But I mean, at some point, we can't shelter kids forever. We can't say, okay, here you're 16, here's your phone, here's the internet, good luck. There's kind of like working them into that process, teaching them about responsibility and things.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the age is as important as the filters and really monitoring and trying to keep communication open with them. I do think if our kids went to public school, I think I would be a little further along in letting them have one. They're homeschooled, so
add that to the chaos.
Yeah,
that's true. That's a good point.
I think it would, it might be a different story if that were our situation. But I think the biggest thing would be not just, here you go, do whatever you want. Because they'll just get them sweet little selves in trouble. And a watch would be a good idea for high school. I mean, for high school, but for school, because they can contact them. And I think we answered this last time, but what are the top 3 ways to affair-proof your marriage? And we talked about transparency, communication, but mainly our relationship with the Lord. I mean, that's where most affairs start, is when one spouse begins to walk away from God, or gets out of the Word and becomes, they're starting to grow distant and cold and callous. And she talked about bitterness and unforgiveness. And it's a process. Having an affair doesn't usually happen, just happen. It's a process of drifting away from God and entertaining thoughts from the enemy, that I don't deserve this, I can find better. And the enemy starts to plant. And it's a process. So the number one way to affair-proof your marriage is to keep your heart filled with God's Spirit and communicating. She's feeling irritated, or she's feeling distant, or she feels like, our marriage is not in a good spot right now. It's not healthy. Okay, what do we do? Let me take tomorrow off and let's just go on a date and let's reconnect. And so you don't let the enemy come in and begin to divide you on that area. I also share social media accounts. I feel like that helps because we've just heard a lot of stories over the years of people coming in that way. I also put that I don't think I said last time we did this was don't compare, because I think comparison is a trap. You start comparing your spouse to someone else, and then that can lead to being very discontent, and then discontent leads to being apathetic and just not caring, and then like he said, all these fiery darts coming in, and all these thoughts are coming in, and you're having a hard time taking your thoughts captive, and that just snowballs, and then next thing you know,
comparing is hard, isn't it? One of my kids recently said, "Dad, you look like The Rock, but you're not as big and strong." I'm like, just like the bald head, I guess. I don't know.
One of them told me, I don't know if I told you this.
All right.
One of them said, because I just turned 40, and so Kylie goes, oh, or no, yeah, I don't know which one now. But they go, oh, 40's not old. I'm like, thanks. She's like, you look old, but 40's not old.
Kylie said that.
Like, you should have quit while you were ahead. You were doing good for a minute there.
Wow. So that
Kylie, yeah.
So back to 3 ways to affair-proof your marriage. That would be number 1, 2, and 3. Your own relationship with God, because you can have these, accountability or sharing accounts or all these little things, but it's really an issue of the heart.
Yeah, because you could get around all that.
Yeah. And I still run into people sometimes that, like, they don't leave their phone out. They don't allow their spouse to have their phone password. And it's, I don't know, a secret bank account and a phone they can't look at. That's not good. So you want to be transparency. Grab the phone, here's passwords. And that really just takes away a lot of the fuel from the enemy, because the devil always works in darkness, always covering things up and trying to knock us off course. And he wants to destroy marriages, doesn't he? That's one of the big goals right now, I think, of the enemy is families, marriages, and the sanctity of life, the whole big issues that are going on right now. So do you have any questions on this? You can go right there to that microphone. I think it's working. Who's first? No one? Don't be embarrassed. Who wants to go first? Perry? Lori? Rick? Okay, there he goes. I knew there was somebody there.
I was ready, she told me to wait.
All right, fire away.
For both of you?
Yeah, speak right into it.
Sorry, for both of you, you have work and then you have home. Is there anything that you do aside from prayer time that gets you just away from and something that's like just calming to yourself?
Okay, what's calming to our other, because we have work and we have home, so how do we get relaxation?
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
Okay, like individually?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Do you want to chime in? Well, I know, there's a lot of little things. Thank God to Morgan's mom. She got us a day at a spa in Santa Clarita that we can finally get away. She's going to watch the baby, so we'll do that for half a day. And I usually like going, me personally, just get away and go up in the hills here or wherever and walk and worship and pray and just turn off. I got to get back in. I used to not bring my phone as much, but just getting back into that time of connecting with God. So that's my big thing is exercising as far as walking and praying and listening to God's Spirit and listening to worship as well.
Yeah. For me, probably just, he's real good at letting me just do an errand by myself and not have to, have all the kids in tow. So, not like grocery shopping errand, but just like go do whatever you want type of errand.
Well, not whatever you want type of errand.
No.
She'll never come back, right?
Yeah. But yeah, just being able to, I would say for me, just being able to get out alone, doing, whatever.
I think our vacation helps too when we go. Vacation's interesting. When you have 5 kids, it's not really a vacation.
No, you need a vacation from your
you're
vacation.
Not, it's actually, you come home
it's a lot of work.
More tired than when you went, but it's good for the kids anyway. Any other questions? We can go by the microphone right there and just ask us. Chris, do you want to go over there? Or you want to say it real quick? I can repeat it. You want to say it and I can repeat it?
What are some ways you guys filter or agree on what is a movie?
Oh, that's a good one.
Or TV shows, like what are acceptable? How do you filter that? Because I grew up in a family where we watched lots of action movies.
Yeah.
Like superhero movies, which I think in the 90s or like in early 80s or late 80s.
Right.
Not necessarily as bad or something, but as an adult now watching some of them, you're like, ooh, like, we let my son watch Spider-Man and he started beating the heck out of my daughter.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good question. And for those, we're trying to pick up the audio on it, so I'll repeat on how to make, how do you agree on media choices, basically. And that's a good question because I think she would agree she's probably more lenient. And I can take the harder line. So trying to, my kids aren't going to hell if they happen to watch Barbie. And so it's trying to fix those, where do you draw that line? Because nowadays, you got to be, really careful on what you allow. For example, the big one, they saw Frozen, the magic in it, and I don't really like that, but I explained to them the difference, magic and what Disney is not good company. And so I don't go around saying, if I did, they wouldn't watch anything. Because not too many things meet that standard.
Right.
Unless, me and Aubrey went and watched Little Women I was bored, but she liked it. The 1800 version of it. It was PG. It was a kind of good story about girls and sisters, and that was a good date I took her on. I looked at it first, and didn't have anything in it that was inappropriate, and so we probably, Chris, to answer your question, I've probably compromised more in this than I normally would have, but it doesn't mean I might have been too rigid in that area. There is a difference, like action movies, because when I watched the Spider-Man 2, I thought there's so many things inappropriate in it that you got to start looking. I got to start looking online a little bit more, because I just you see a rating, people say, oh, it's great, and you go, and it's like, no, this is not good. Even PG in Hollywood can sometimes have a lot of innuendos, a lot of sexual things. And then Spider-Man, it made him, he's a kid, it kind of like he had sex with that lady. It was just so inappropriate. So I guess I have a real critical eye when it comes to movies. I'll come home and I'll tell, they did this and this, and so I can see all these little things in a movie. I can find it. So we actually are struggling through that ourselves. We are pretty adamant about certain things. Definitely rated R. Most PG-13s are not good. I want to read about it more than just to go by the rating. I want to know what's being taught. So I don't know if we found that balance yet. I'm kind of in a I don't know what the right just
learning through.
Yeah.
I've learned to just default to him. So if there's something that I'm like, I think, it's probably okay if we teach him through it and talk about it. But if it's something that he has a strong, a hard no on, I'm like, cool. I defer to him on that.
So finding the balance, I think you'd have to talk with your spouse and agree on something. Is this good for the kids? Because it is hard, isn't it? I mean, there's so many movies. There's so many things that are out there. And I usually go into these things not quite knowing everything that I'm getting into, because I heard from a friend that was good, and you take their advice on it, and you find out, oh man, what's their definition of good? So it's an area I'll let you all know I haven't mastered, but I am pretty selective. We don't go to the movies much. We're kind of careful what we watch, but some things creep in there, and
there's been things that we're like, okay, we'll put on, and then quickly realize this isn't good, so we'll just turn it off. And some of it's trial and error. Some of it, ahead of time, and then some of it you just go, whoops.
Yeah.
Do better next time.
Like with Disney, with Frozen and thing, I know it's probably going to shock some people just right there. But, I took my daughter to an evolutionary teacher's class for 3 hours and let him teach on evolution. And we talked about it afterwards at the college, and she can't believe that people believe in evolution. So you give them a worldview, you help them in this area. So I would teach why magic isn't good, that why, as you guys are growing up, here's what you need to be careful about. Try to use it as a learning tool. I know some people might say, well, it's just an excuse. Well, if you found a way to perfectly watch or perfectly parent your kids without having them watch anything appropriate while still not being so tight and legalistic on them, I'd love to know how you figure that one out. But it is hard. It's difficult. Even if you're on Netflix, they click the wrong channel and or the wrong movie, and they start getting some very graphic things. So it's hard these days. Another question? Okay, go ahead.
I was just wondering, in the finances, if you have a disagreement on expenses or something like that, how do you guys handle that?
We don't talk about finances. She has her account, I have mine, and we just do whatever we want. Oh, finances.
That's fun.
Well, I'll give you a big, broad picture. Before I went full-time here, I was in real estate, and I was doing really good. Like you see these Ferris Terraciano and Maxi K signs. I was on that course, and was going to make some very, very good money because I knew a lot of people in the valley. I've lived here, and then God planted the church, and then I told my boss, I'm probably going to do this. I'm sure he thought, okay, well, I'm sure he'll change his mind in 6 months, and I never did. So I finally just let that go. I didn't renew my license. I still have my license, I think. I just let everything go. And we started the church, but we downscaled from our home, from vehicles. We paid off bills. We got to just a basic, family living, like a house tract home in Palmdale. And then I pay the majority, like house payment, because I'm trying to send any little bit extra to get that house paid off quicker. And so I'll handle maybe a few of the big payments, and then she takes the rest and does the day-to-day toilet paper, paper towels, paper plates. We'll kind of spread the shopping of groceries over. So we have a budget each month, and we stay within that budget. Actually, we've been doing pretty good. We don't pull from savings, and we don't have a lot left over. We just have a budget to stay within. So we balance it together, if that answers your question. We can see the finances together, and we agreed on tithing right off the gross first. That's our very first bill, goes back to the church. And then we have the bills already set, who pays what, and then we just, but I think like we need some new things for our house right now, it's like some fixtures. And so we have to plan for that. And so we kind of plan together, especially on bigger decisions. But there's a little bit of flexibility. She'll have a little bit of a budget. I'll have a little bit of a budget. And if she sees a shirt she likes for our daughter, she buys it. If I see something that we need, I just pick it up as long as we stay within that budget, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions on finances? Or anything else? Microphone's still open. Got a few minutes. Kyla, no questions? Perry? Dennis? Eric? Oh no, I don't know about this one. Be nice.
I want to know you guys' plan or perception for dating for your children.
That's a good one.
Never.
Well,
I told this guy we need to start praying for their spouse from like the time our first kid was like 2 days old. And he was like, I can't pray for her spouse. Don't even say that.
Can't pray for spouse.
You remember?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Now you do.
I'll be cleaning my gun when he comes over to pick her up. Honey.
And our poor son has 4 girls, 4 sisters that's going to be fun.
Well, we're just about getting there, Eric. And, I think as far as setting the dating standard, you do set that early. You show them what they should expect, how a man should treat them or a woman, why it's so important. We use opportunities to even say, now see why it's so important to find someone who loves the Lord. And so we're looking for opportunities but at some point, they're going to have to make that decision on their own. But if you're talking about what age to date, I think it depends on the person. We're not really big into dating, like just date. Like, it's they used to call it courting, where you're going to invest into someone that you can see is, someone you could end up eventually, building a relationship with. And what those qualities are. So we're kind of talking with them already. I talked to my son. I just had to give him the talk a couple months ago. Oh my goodness.
I'm like, I have to do it 4 times. You can at least do it once.
He just sat there silent like, huh. Wow, okay. That was one of the hardest things I've done all year. It took me like an hour to get it out.
I think you sent me a text before you were going to do it. Like, I'm more nervous about this than I am about, I don't know, speaking somewhere, something you said. Yeah, it was funny. So basically, we're arranging their marriages.
Does that kind of answer your question? I mean, as far as...
I would if I
allowing them, showing them why a godly spouse is so important. And I think at an early age you can say no. That's not a good idea. I don't think that relationship is healthy. I think you can do that. You can help steer them until they reach that age where they will be making those decisions on their own.
Yeah. Right now for us personally, our oldest is 14, almost 15, and she's not allowed to have a boyfriend. Does she want one? That vacillates, sometimes. She has asked, when am I allowed, and all of those things, but we just don't... 25. We just don't see the wisdom in it right now, and so teaching her to keep her heart pure and saved, and like the verses, don't awaken love before it's time. So no, you're not going to read romance novels, and you're not going to be watching all these movies that are all about love and different things, because that's going to awaken that desire. I mean, it's a God-given desire, and he puts it there to want a spouse eventually. So letting her know it's okay, she'll have a crush here and there, or the other ones too, and that's natural, and that's part of life, and trying to keep that communication open, but still saying, there's going to be a time and place for that, and that time is not right now. So
yeah, my 7-year-old still wants to marry me, so that's a positive. And we have to remember not to listen to the world. What's best for your family, not what their friends are doing, or the world. Even driving, there's some kids that shouldn't be driving at 16. It's okay to wait another year or so. I mean, you don't have to just give them I should not have been driving at 16. Amen. Oh, wow. So any other questions on that topic or anything else? If you say real quick and loud, and then I'll repeat it. That's a good one.
Yes.
How about chores for your kids? And what age?
Yes, and amen.
We're actually working through that. We're working through that right now. We have, charts, who does this, when do they do it? And we actually pay them a little bit for some things, for cleaning up and the trash, and some things they don't get paid for. I don't know how many of you saw that video where I put all the vegetables cut up in the refrigerator. I have my daughter do that. I pay her like $10 for the whole week just to get those all ready and things. So we do that. I'm sure you have more input on that than me, probably.
I'm a big fan. Like he said, there's some chores that's just, you're part of this family, you're part of making this mess every day, so you're going to be a part of cleaning it up. And
yeah, they don't get paid for that.
We don't get paid for that. But extra things, I think is good. But yeah, I say the sooner the better. I think even, a 2 or 3-year-old can pick up their own little toys, and then it goes from there. It is hard for someone who's more OCD or something to allow the kids to start doing it, because they don't do it properly at the beginning. But if you don't teach them early, then it's just going to be an even harder road. So I would say to that mom or dad that has a hard time, just got to let them do it. Just let them, and don't fix it right after them, because then they're going to get all insecure about it. Fix it later, or the next time they go to do it, tell them, hey, let's try it this way, and just kind of.
I messed up on that this week.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say it.
In the garage, he made that whole mess. I said, I'll clean the garage.
I'm like, Shane's going to vacuum the garage, all the sawdust, and he's like, I just told him I'm going to do it. I'm like, he needs to learn how to do it. But I didn't.
I want to get it right, on that one.
But I struggled with that, with the dishes or with, whatever. But now they're like little pros, and they know how to do it. I'm a little nervous for when we're empty nesters, because they're going to
be trouble.
But there won't be the mess either, so.
We have time for one more. Maybe two. Oh, Rebecca, I knew it was coming.
Do you think at any point it's wise to reveal your current struggles or past struggles to your kids without feeling like you're giving them a ticket to do the same thing?
Oh, that's a good one.
That just happened with me. I'm not going to give a detail just because I don't think it would be edifying for everyone, but I did have one of our kids. They all asked different questions at different times, and one of them in particular had asked a question a few different times over the last couple of years, and I just kept avoiding it, and finally it was just like point blank straight to my face, and I had to give the answer, and I said, and that is why you don't do it, so you never have to look your 14-year-old in the eye and tell them what I just had to tell you, So I don't know that you have to give them everything all at once or even ever, but I do think there's some wisdom in, if they're asking you straight up and they're wanting to be open and have that communication, I think that you can give them a little bit and just kind of see where they're at and what you feel like the Lord would have you share with them. And it's the age-old thing. You want to tell them, do as I say, don't do as I did. And a lot of kids are going to have to learn on their own and learn the hard way. And some kids will learn from your example. Some kids will say, I don't want to do that because I see the mess that caused you. And then other kids are going to say, well, you did it. So, and that part you can't control, Yeah. So you just.
I think it's kind of situation.
Yeah.
It's situational depending on what they're asking and will it benefit them? With my kids listening to the sermons, they know a lot more about me than I want them to know. From my past abortion that I talk about to my past with alcohol and the party lifestyle. So they know it because they hear it in the sermons. Not proud of it at all, but it is a good opportunity to talk to them about how I made wrong choices and how fortunate they are to have, a church like this and to be loving the Lord at a young age. And so we kind of just turn that back. We turn that back on the enemy for sure, because he can beat you up with your past. You don't want your kids to know. But I think it's okay, as long as you don't divulge too much and at the right time, and if they're sincerely asking. One more. Oh, Rhonda.
Okay, so I just want to know your opinion on when, and I know you're not there yet, but when you have young adults still living at home and they're paying for their own phone, but you're trying to put restrictions on them. So what's your opinion on that? Okay. It's kind of like, well, I pay for it so I can be on it all day, and I don't agree with that.
Well, I think if they're staying at your home, they live under your roof.
Feel free to talk directly.
Yeah, I'll talk to Sage. I'll talk to Sage afterwards. But I feel if like with your car, with your bills, if you're living underneath the parent's home and they're still responsible for you, technically, financially, spiritually, right. I think it's okay for a parent to kind of regulate what the kids do in the home. That's part of living there, part of the blessing of living there. So we'll talk to her. We'll set her straight.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Last one?
Some of those things, too, are a privilege, not a right. Like I remember when, for instance, when we let the one kid have the one app that she wanted, I was very clear that app could be taken away at any time if it needs to be, and it's not a right. You don't just get to have this just because the world offers it. It's something that is a privilege as a reward for either good behavior or just whatever.